Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for the opportunity. I got to be honest. As I'm preparing for this morning, this talk, I was thinking about how sort of weird we are. We cybersecurity in general, and I think we have such a cool community here. And part of that is because, yeah, we're weird. And by weird, I'm thinking, what are you up to today? What are you up to today? I'm imagining this conversation with my wife, and I'm going to a sock summit, a sock summit, right? And we're going to be talking about hunting for needles and the strange, bizarre context of what we do and how we do it. And it's one of those like, if you know, you know. And I posted again, pondering this talk posted on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago that my day job is finding a needle in a stack of needles, and I'm not all that great at the socials, to be honest. So I'm never sure what's going to resonate. And this statement clearly resonated with the security analysts and the incident responders on the planet of finding a needle in a stack of needles. That is indeed a pretty apt description of what we do all day, every day. And the idea being, of course, that we are bombarded with telemetry, tons and tons of information. And not that long ago, when we approached a stack of needles from an analytical perspective, we were trying to find the evil needle, like this one right here. That one looks particularly evil, and we've moved forward, we've transitioned a little bit, and often our existing technical controls, they spot the evil needle for us in the form of an antivirus alert or an EDR alert or a SIM alert or something like that. And our jobs honestly have transitioned to finding the evil needle, to finding the unauthorized needle in a sea of needles and authorized normalcy. And this is challenging, and it is honestly it's fun. It is the cool part of our job, providing context and an efficient approach and indeed determining what doesn't belong here. So today I want to talk about, imagine if you will, that we had the ability to approach a stack of needles and determine that we don't really care about these. This is normal. And we don't really care about these. And we begin to narrow and refine our process, our approach, our methodology, and say, whoa, whoa, whoa. We can efficiently and effectively, as it pertains to endpoints in particular, focus our efforts and increase our efficiency and get really, really, really good at finding the needle that we're looking for. My name is Patterson Cake. I am the Director of Incident Response at Black Hills Information Security. I do digital forensics and incident response as my day job. We only have about 20 minutes to go today, and I'm jealous for your time. I could spend all day, every day talking with you about this stuff, but Jason won't let me. So we're going to do our best to be a great example today in terms of timing and schedule. We're going to talk a little bit about context, and then we'll move into the idea of causality, and then we'll end with some sort of technical deep dives. And if you've been to a presentation of mine before, you're probably aware that it is standard operating procedure for me to fit at least twice the content in the available time. So I'm going to go at a high rate of speed. Good news, at the end, I'm going to leave you with some external resources. You don't have to take copious notes. All I'm asking is that you pay attention, hang on for the ride, and then at the end, if this resonates, you can check out the GitHub repos, the repositories for some of the technical pieces and parts, and then we'll end today, of course, with my contact info. If you have follow-up questions, I love to talk about this stuff, and I love to make new friends, so stay tuned for the contacts at the very end. So why are we here and why are we talking about this morning? It is my opinion that the future of security boiled down into its simplistic form. Future of security is endpoint and identity, endpoint and identity. And today we're here to talk specifically about endpoint investigations, and a cheat sheet, an approach, a methodology for endpoint investigations. And these two things are in juxtaposition. And really what I mean by this is that endpoints, we'll talk about what I mean specifically, but endpoints is where human beings interact with technology, and for better or for worse, this becomes often the weak link, the attack vector of choice, the human being. So we will see this, I think, moving into the future. Endpoint and identity are keys to our understanding of security and security analysis, etc. What do I mean by an endpoint? Great question. There are some specific components, and I literally am thinking of laptops, desktops, mobile devices, servers, switches, routers, firewalls, all the things. And the general characteristics are some sort of operating system, generally some sort of user interface, a way for an individual to interact with the system, app services data just meaning something useful. We wouldn't have this in our environment if it didn't have a function, have some value. There is always hardware. Of course, you may be interacting with a virtual endpoint, but it is still running someplace, somewhere on some device. Last but definitely not least, little red asterisk, because network attached is critical. Network attached means that this endpoint, this device can interact with other components of my environment. This makes me care a lot more than an isolated endpoint that's not network attached. So that's crucial. That's the TRS-80 in case anyone was wondering. I dropped that into chat asking if anybody recognized what a TRS-80 was, and nobody responded, which made me feel old, but there you go. I am a huge fan of hyperbole. Forgive me, but I do active incident response for a living, and so active IR is not a time for finesse. It is not a time for a high-level overarching strategy. It's a time for tactical action. It is a time for decisive action. So for me, horse close enough for horseshoes and hand grenades. Yeah, exactly. Close enough for horseshoes and hand grenades. We just need to get close enough. Close enough. And so everything we care about happens on an endpoint in the context of an identity. Everything, yeah, close enough. Close enough for the purposes of today's conversation, close enough for active IR, close enough for triage, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. Everything we care about happens on an endpoint in the context of an identity. And one of the key components of an endpoint, as mentioned moments ago, is an operating system. And I have good news and bad news. The good news is that largely there are two flavors of OSs that we need to be aware of and concerned about in today's modern landscape, and that is Windows and then Nix variants. Linux, obviously, Unix, Mac in general. So two primary operating systems, that's the good news. The bad news is that operating systems are extremely complex. It's a little hard to determine exactly how complex the average OS is, but I've put some general indicators on this slide about all that is encompassed in, well, Windows or a standard Linux distribution, assuming that there is a standard Linux distribution. From man pages to registry keys to lines of code, my world often revolves around forensic artifacts, and generally speaking, I would estimate we're talking about somewhere between 1 to 2 million forensic artifacts, depending on how you define that. But far too many needles for me to approach rapidly and effectively without some methodology to reduce and refine this footprint. Again, we're focusing today on endpoint. Operating system is generally the components that we're investigating, and it is overwhelming. It is too much for us to master within a reasonable period of time. And so my hypothesis today is that we can reduce this to approximately 5 artifacts or 5 artifact categories specifically. That's the goal of today's conversation. It's really important that we focus on the right things, that we ask the right questions and we look for the answers in the appropriate places. And as an industry, I feel like we focus just a little bit too much on cause, the cause and effect component. And we do care about the cause, right? Causality is an overarching initiator for most of our workflows. But instead of focusing on the cause, again, my presupposition today is that we really need to focus on the effect, how and where threats, malware, threat actors intersect with an endpoint, and I call that attack surface. So we want to focus on the effect because we'll see that that is significantly more consistent than the cause. And what do I mean by that? Let's pause and think about how typical threats behave. And by threat, again, I'm talking about malware, threat actor, unauthorized activity, and actions on your endpoint. And these are largely behavioral. These are categorically behavioral, and they are relatively constant, relatively consistent. This is how most endpoint interactions play out. There's initial access, network communications, detection evasions, actions on objective, and persistence. And this is sort of a sequence of events, a threat actor malware standard operating procedure. These things are recurrent. We see them all the time in almost every attack scenario. This is the cause piece. And what we want to do is take that perspective and translate it to how the cause impacts our endpoint, aka attack surface. And this, again, is my oversimplified presupposition that everything that we care about on an endpoint is going to impact memory, identity, network, and disk. Now, this is kind of a useful mnemonic, potentially. These are not discrete technical categories. These are just ways for us to think about how we approach endpoint analysis. So just keep this in mind as we move forward. These are, as of sort of the end of last year, some of the most common threats. And we don't need to labor over these. These are the causes. And we love to give them cool names. And often we, again, focus on whether it's sock ghoulish or scarlet goldfinch, etc. And again, the good news is that if we do a little analysis on these pieces and parts, these causes, we'll see that the effects are often very similar and somewhat consistent. And so we, again, focus on these things. These are threat commonalities, not exhaustive. This doesn't encompass all the things, but we see the initial access, the source of most of these is indeed the internet. We see that command and control network communications are a constant. And fortunately, lately, they're largely boring. Good old-fashioned TCP/IP, HTTP, HTTPS. We see that detection evasion, as mentioned, finding unauthorized normal is the new approach, meaning the threat actors are leveraging lol bins, living off the land binaries, things that are built into your operating system, using your own tools against you. Actions on objective, doing the things. Why are they there? What are they trying to accomplish? And naturally, they want to hang around. They want to persist. These are the common components of threat actor malware behaviors. And what we need to do is prioritize our investigative response for maximum effect. We have limited time, limited resource, limited availability, and our goal is to simplify, 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 and to apply rapid assessment, rapid analysis to win the day, hopefully, against the threat actors, so to speak. How does that play out? Well, in summary, we start with a gazillion needles. We take those needles and we recognize that the vast majority of them are not important to us. We filter that through the perspective of how modern malware, modern threat actors behave. We further consolidate that into 4 primary operating system or endpoint categories. And at the end of the day, my hypothesis is that these are the 5 things that we care about. That is processes, running processes, sockets, which are network communications, writable directories, which we'll expand on in just a second, scheduled tasks, and services. And legitimately, from my perspective, these are the 5 most critical categorical artifacts on an endpoint. And you may notice that these are, in many instances, largely Windows. I'm sorry, that's just a fact. For most of us who are just a tiny bit nerdy, we're not super excited about getting really, really comfortable and familiar with Windows, but we need to, because it is, again, it is largely remains the desktop operating system of choice, and it remains the attack surface of choice in many instances. So processes, sockets, writable DIRs, scheduled tasks, and services. We'll see those apply to Linux and Mac as well, but as we move into discussion of investigation, we're going to focus a little bit on Windows because we need to. So let's roll up our sleeves and get somewhat technical. We're going to go through these again at a high rate of speed. You don't have to consume the details. All of this is referenced in a GitHub repo for you, git.new/needles. I will revisit that at the end so you can take a pic or grab that shortened URL. This is my favorite artifact, running process with command line, my favorite artifact. I have again staged some of these mostly PowerShell one-liners. I made them one-liners on purpose because in many instances, when you're interacting with an endpoint through an EDR console, it is not session-based. It doesn't retain your session between commands. So having a single one-line command to interrogate an endpoint can be really important. So this is running process with a command line. And legitimately, this is my favorite place to start for rapid triage. Number one, I'm not sure who said it. I wish I could recall, but I heard once upon a time that malware can hide, but it must run. And this is the evidence of that. This is show me what's actively occurring on an endpoint right here, right now, through very simple enumeration of the endpoint. And often this can stand out as per this example, camel case PowerShell.exe. There's the evil, or there's the unauthorized normal, because PowerShell is normal, so to speak. Number two, network communications are a constant, command and control. And this one is not a one-liner. This one was actually written, I created this one in response to Bootloader. And Bootloader is a fairly common malware family still in existence, active, rampant today. And one of the features functions of Bootloader is that it performs a sleep cycle, a randomization interval of network communications. And so this is a little bit more complex to monitor network communications intermittently for a period of 60 seconds, hoping to catch that C2 in action. That's number two. All malware, all modern malware is going to connect over the wire at some point. If we can catch that, of course, it illuminates our understanding of the effect, the impact. Number three, writable DIRs, world writable DIRs. And what I mean by that is any authenticated user can write where on a typical endpoint. And for Windows, program data, app data, a handful of other potential directories, consider running this in advance in your normal environment. In your environment, what directories can a standard authenticated user write to? This is hugely significant. You can stare at the details. If you remember nothing else from today's conversation, this is the one. All malware on Windows writes to a randomized app data directory. All of it. Exceptions, of course. But please, as a takeaway, this is the source of all evil for malicious writes to disk. It just is. Number four, scheduled tasks are a fan favorite for malware and threat actors today for persistence, not persistence, persistence. And the key to this, of course, is that you can create a scheduled task as a standard user. And so this is often leveraged. Once again, this is a one-liner. It's actually leveraging the sort of legacy tool SCH tasks, but it's easier to get all the verbosity and all information we need than it typically is through PowerShell. So that's the choice here. Number four, last and not least, so to speak, services, number five, sorry. Services used to be the fan favorite from a threat actor malware perspective, but it generally requires local admin. So it is still potentially a persistence mechanism in conjunction with an escalation mechanism, a way to gain additional privileges. But this is not quite as common anymore because it does require local admin. It is still a critical indicator, critical component. This is an aside. I'm a huge fan of differential analysis or comparative analysis, and you can check out git.do/baseline. And this is just the idea of saying, let's take a known good list of any one of these artifacts, running processes in this example, and compare and contrast against an investigative target. And this can often reduce our stack of needles by 70, 80% with minimal effort. So again, you can check out the repo there and potentially apply that to this investigation to further reduce and refine the artifacts in question. As mentioned, this is generally applicable to Linux and Mac, etc. So I have crafted a list of similar sort of one-line commands to enumerate these things on Nix variants, Linux and Mac in particular. There's a distinct shortened URL for the Nix needles. And ultimately, I say this a lot. I don't care if you use my tools or my commands or even specifically my workflow, but you need a workflow, you need a methodology, and I would suggest that you at least consider this process for reducing refining, and creating efficiencies for seeking out frankly, the needles that you care about. Processes, sockets, world writable directories, scheduled tasks. Remember that applies to both Linux and Windows, whether it's typical scheduled tasks or cron, etc. Running services, again, which also applies to multiple OSs. And check out the repos. If you'd like to learn more, do more, actually step through hands-on 8-hour workshop with me to walk through incident response simplified, the actual application of this sort of investigative approach, rapid triage. Join me on April 3rd. We got a one-day class set up for you. As promised, external resources and my contact info. This is a set of shortened links that relate to today's conversation, from the PowerShell one-liners to the Linux commands to my overarching malware investigations approach to a baseline comparison, again, comparing known good to potential investigative source. And then, of course, last but not least, the rapid triage workflow, which is legitimately a significant part of our investigative workflow, our production investigative workflow. Huge thank you to Black Hills that they allow us to actually share this with you. And then you can find me, should you be interested, have a question, have an issue, have a suggestion. Again, let's be friends. Thank you so much for your time today.
So Patterson, thank you so much for kicking off the SOC Summit. You do have a class that's coming up, a workshop that is on April 3rd. It's on Friday. How many hours is it?
8 hour.
And what do you think people are going to get the most out of it?
Honestly, I want you to sort of take this overarching conversation and build out a workflow and a methodology. I'm going to equip you with the entire incident response simplified process from AV alert all the way through your investigations. And it'll be super fun and useful, I hope. And then you can take all of that info away and make it your own and actually apply it in your environment. That's my hope.
Okay. And Patterson, I mean, one of the reasons that we did this SOC Summit is so that people could be introduced to you, introduced to the way and style that you teach. And so if you saw this morning and you're like, I'd like to learn more from Patterson, this is an opportunity for you to follow that link inside the Zoom chat, and we'll also put it in Discord, and see if you want to register for this class. It's not a requirement. It is optional. It is up to you and your career and what you want to do with it, but we wanted to make it available for you. So Patterson, you also are speaking at the Threat Hunting Summit coming up in June. You also do a lot of things here at Black Hills Information Security, and I just want to say thank you. And I think the community thanks you too for the generous heart that you have to help others. I always like to ask this question, but let's see if there's any other questions from the audience. But Patterson, why do you like to teach?
Boy, that's a multi-pronged question, but I will say that the greatest joy in my current job is crushing the adversary. It is stopping the criminals from damaging any environment. And so the opportunity to stop and share anything that might be useful to help you do the same, to stop unauthorized access and actions in your environment, that's super exciting to me. Let's do it again tomorrow.
All right. Sounds good.